Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is recusals. Rabbinic literature has a long history of recusal due to conflict of interest. It is one of the most used arguments to disprove or diminish someone's point of view. The expression used to describe this argument is nogea b'davar. Literally translated, it means touched by the item, but it actually means involved in the issue being discussed. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, now in the eye of the latest storm to swirl around the Trump administration, has, by recusing himself from any investigations involving Russia and the presidential election, admitted that he is indeed nogea b'davar. In contemporary modern English, we would say that someone, in this case, Sessions, has skin in the game. The idea is that a person involved in a judgment or in an argument will gain from the outcome, even indirectly. The argument evolves out of the biblical principle that judges be independent, that they have no bias either toward the rich or toward the poor, or be influenced by power. The command is stated clearly in Deuteronomy chapter 16, lines 18 through 20. And here's how it reads. You shall appoint magistrates and officials for your tribes in all the settlements that the Lord your God is giving you, and they shall govern the people with due justice. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall show no partiality. You shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. Justice, justice, thou shalt pursue. The Jewish and biblical and rabbinic principles are clear. No partiality. Provide due process. Corruption blinds those who judge. The biblical command extends to the commitment to impartiality further than merely the judiciary. It focuses also on the appointees and officers of the court. That is why the terms magistrates and officials are used in the biblical text. This very section of Deuteronomy has been one of the foundations of Western justice. The concept of justice and liberty and due process for all was popular with our founding fathers. United States judicial buildings are adorned with biblical verses about justice because they resonate as symbols. On their outside and inner walls, they announce these things. Official buildings, courthouses throughout the country echo these and similar phrases. Even the Liberty Bell boasts a biblical quote with the words, "Proclaim liberty throughout the land unto all the inhabitants thereof," which is, of course, Leviticus 25, verse 10. The Jewish community is split over the stance A.G. Sessions has taken, and that makes sense. They're split down the same lines they were split during and immediately after the election, the exact same lines. It's hard to find anyone in the Jewish community who does not have a strong stance on Donald Trump and on his Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. Historically, the Jewish community is deeply engaged in politics. The delineation has never been clearer than in this past election. Those on the right tend to be from the Orthodox Jewish community, and they are the people who now are defending Jeff Sessions. They're confused as to why Michael Flynn had to resign, and they're shocked that when the Attorney General in the Obama administration, Loretta Lynch, had an impromptu conversation on the tarmac and in the plane with former President Bill Clinton, as she was in the throes of an investigation of his wife Hillary, there were no serious calls for her resignation or even recusal. In that case, as in all others, the demands of the far right are easily dismissed. Is there an inconsistency here? There certainly is. As for the case of the Attorney General perjuring himself in front of the Senate committee, this issue would be dealt with by the rabbis in the same way it is being dealt with today. Senator Al Franken's question sufficiently vague in its context that Sessions could answer it in the way that he did without violating the basic rules of perjury. Was the question directed to Sessions as one of Trump's election surrogates? Or was the Franken question referring to Sessions as a senator? So there is clearly an appearance of impropriety, no question, even if Sessions did not officially perjure himself, rabbinically or in the United States. He must amend the record, and he should certainly recuse himself. In rabbinic law, the appearance of impropriety is enough to challenge the status of the official. In his position as Attorney General, Jeff Sessions did the right thing by recusing himself. Loretta Lynch did not. Under any circumstances, it's hard to investigate the person who appointed you and the person you worked hard to convince Americans to elect. And Jeff Sessions was the first significant establishment politician, albeit from Alabama, who endorsed and tirelessly worked for then-candidate Trump. In rabbinic literature and debate, a person who is charged with nogea b'davar is assumed to be biased. We read it with the knowledge that the recuser has an axe to grind. In prosecution and in investigation, however, things are different. Attorneys general should always recuse themselves when investigating their bosses. They are always nogea b'davar. Sessions did the right thing. He made the right call. Let's congratulate Attorney General Jeff Sessions, accept his decision, and move on. Moving on ourselves, it was supposed to be a secret, but by now, everyone who takes an interest in the Middle East knows about the meeting organized by then Secretary of State John Kerry. The secret meeting took place in a picturesque white villa just outside the Jordanian port city of Aqaba about a year ago. Present at the secret meeting were leaders and representatives of Israel, Egypt, Jordan, Palestinian Authority, and Saudi Arabia. Details of the meeting were first published in one Egyptian newspaper and two Hebrew-Israeli papers. By now, it's been picked up all over. Good money is betting that the man who let the secret loose is John Kerry himself. But why? And why now? The meeting was Kerry's plan to force Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas, who was not present at the meeting, but with whom Kerry spoke face-to-face the day before the big secret meeting, in another secret meeting in Amman, to sit down and resume final negotiations with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Not only did Kerry have a specific plan, Kerry also had a list of responsibilities to be assumed by each of the interested and involved parties to the plan. This division of responsibilities was reported in the left-leaning Israeli newspaper Haaretz by correspondent analyst Barak Ravid, and corroborated in the centrist-leaning Israeli newspaper Yediot by correspondent analyst Smadar Perry. According to both those sources, the plan was to have U.S. Secretary Kerry and Egyptian President al-Sisi pressure Netanyahu to sit down at the negotiation table and to have King Hussein of Jordan pressure Abbas. The entire plan had the blessing of the King of Saudi Arabia. Netanyahu brought Isaac Herzog, leader of the opposition, into the secret. Herzog was so eager to participate in what he thought would be the beginning of the end of decades-long standoff that he even pledged to join a unity government with Netanyahu. In the end, the plan fell apart. It fell apart in Israel and it fell apart in the Arab world. We know about most of what transpired through an Egyptian open letter, as it was called in the Arabic press, that was published in Egypt. The letter, not surprisingly, lays total blame at the feet of Bibi Netanyahu and Israel. The letter was penned by Dr. Yahya Mustafa Kamel, a close advisor to Egyptian President al-Sisi and a renowned Egyptian scholar. He begins his letter with the salutation, "My dear Netanyahu." Kamel proceeds by expressing the frustration shared by so many others by addressing the elephant in the room. You were so close to an agreement, and you had the support of your opposition, as well as the support and the leadership of the mainstream Arab states. In essence, he's asking, what happened? Did Netanyahu torpedo an opportunity to move ahead? Yes, he probably did. But why? There was such a gain from the successful agreement, and it seems that this was a real opportunity to move ahead, to force the Palestinians to the table, and maybe even come to a resolution. This could have been a turning point. Decades of tension and conflict could have been resolved if only the Israeli and the Palestinians would have met. The reason is clear. Israel's prime minister made a calculation, and his calculation paid off. Netanyahu bet on Trump. The prime minister of Israel bet that Donald Trump would become the next president of the United States, and with that victory would come a better, more friendly United States administration. Netanyahu bet that with the new status Israel would have under the Trump presidency, Israel would have more leverage and would have to sacrifice less in an agreement with the Palestinians. Israel would not be dependent on Kerry/Obama and later on a Clinton agenda. The Kerry plan was a good plan. He brought all the right parties together, but he failed where everyone else failed. He failed because the Palestinians and the Israelis really do not want to speak to each other. That seems pretty clear. It's all about power. They don't want to speak when they feel weak and intimidated, but neither do they want to speak when they feel empowered and cocky. John Kerry, the now former Secretary of State, convened his secret meeting when he was in a position of power. He felt empowered. He felt cocky. Now that he has no longer any power at all, he has nothing to lose. Go ahead, spill the secret. Secure your place in history as the man who almost brought about an end to the standoff between Israel and the Palestinians. But as we all know, almost doesn't count. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. I want to discuss one column today. It's from a website called Israeli Cool, and it's found at www.israelicool.com. That's with 2 L's and a Y. The column is called Watch Elton John's Performance in Bethlehem. It's dated March 6, 2017, and it was authored by Ozzy Dave, probably a pseudonym. The context here is important. Elton John does not actually come to Bethlehem. He plays at the opening of a new hotel and is broadcast live online from the hotel pub. The hotel is important and made headlines. It's called the Walled Off Hotel. This, of course, is a play on the Waldorf hotel name, but it is also clear that it is an attack against Israel, that is seen as having walled off the Palestinians, and it faces the famous security wall. The entire hotel is owned by and is decorated by the world-famous graffiti artist Banksy, and this is how Ozzy Dave begins. While Banksy's brand spanking new walled-off hotel sounds like Waldorf, get it? Has made the news, for some reason, his main attraction at the opening did not. None other than Elton John. Sure, it was a virtual performance, but still. Ozzy Dave continues and says, don't misinterpret this as an anti-Israel performance, because Elton John performed in Israel last year, he writes. While Elton John is clearly showing support for Palestinians, he performed in Israel as recently as last year and had some nice things to say about us. So I think this is just Elton trying to be even-handed, which, incidentally, would likely not be the case if he went to Gaza. He'd likely end up only with one hand, and that's the best-case scenario. Now, Ozzy Dave explains that Banksy and the hotel, on the other hand, are extremely anti-Israel. He says, as for the hotel itself, it certainly looks and sounds highly critical of Israel, to the point of regretting our existence. Now the column quotes graffiti artist and hotel owner Banksy, who said, it's exactly 100 years since Britain took control of Palestine and started rearranging the furniture with chaotic results. Banksy said, I don't know why, but it felt like a good time to reflect on what happens when the United Kingdom makes a huge political decision without fully comprehending the consequences. Ozzy Dave says, but there are those who see the glass as being half full. He continues, a new hotel in the Palestinian city of Bethlehem, designed and owned by the famed graffiti artist Banksy, is one of the most complex and nuanced projects the Mysterious Brit has ever undertaken. The head of the US-based pro-Israel artist group told the Allgemeiner on Sunday, he is finally asking critical questions of both sides, far from his previous heavy-handed and one-sided works in favor of the Palestinians, Craig Dershowitz, the executive director of Artists for Israel, said. And we support any fair and open discussion and are proud to have played at least a small part in moving him to a place of dialogue. According to Banksy's website, the hotel, which features dozens of artists' works, is not aligned to any political movement or pressure group. The aim is to tell the story of the wall from every side and give visitors the opportunity to discover it for themselves. We offer an especially warm welcome to young Israelis. Absolutely no fanaticism is permitted on the premises. Ozzy Dave concludes by quoting Dershowitz, who says that graffiti artists are more nuanced than other artists. According to Dershowitz, the global graffiti artist community is overwhelmingly in support of peaceful coexistence and examining the conflict with new eyes, rather than the black and white zero-sum game that so many activists see on both sides. Artists see many colors. As you watch the 71-second Elton John intro and piano solo that opens the hotel, note that sadly it appears as if the entire place is empty. Live interaction, exchange with Elton John, playing to an empty pub in Bethlehem. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to discuss 3 cartoons today. The first is from one of my favorite cartoonists, Yaakov Kirshen, Dry Bones from the Jerusalem Post. It was published March 5th, 2017. This cartoon is called American Jewry, a Pushover. There's a tombstone with the Star of David and the words American Jewry written on it. Then there's a creepy gray stick figure creeping around the stone. The message is that the stick figure is going to desecrate the cemetery, and the Jewish community is doing nothing about it. Next up is a cartoon by Payam Baramand. It was published on Kagel.com February 29th, 2017. Baramand was born in 1984 in Iran and worked there as a cartoonist until 2014, when he went to Vienna to study and has stayed there and currently lives in Vienna itself. This cartoon is called Meanwhile in Syria. A red round table has people sitting around it. Each person is sitting in front of a nation's flag: the United States, Germany, France, Italy, Russia, etc. In the middle of the table is a stack of dead bodies. It is a description of the Geneva meetings that just concluded after a year without resolutions about Syria. That's why the caption reads, Meanwhile in Syria. In other words, as they talked and accomplished nothing, people died. This next and last cartoon is from the United Arab Emirates. It was drawn by Parish Nath. It was published in the Khalij Times on February 27, 2017. The cartoon is entitled Greece, an Uphill Task. Greece is depicted as a boulder, and 2 people are pushing it uphill. One is the European creditors. The other is the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. The direction signs read, downhill default, uphill Eurozone periphery. The IMF says this is all to avoid Grexit. The idea is that Greece is not solvent, and they're discussing leaving the EU. The obvious answer is that an exit would not only destabilize them, but it would destabilize the entire region in the Middle East. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. The Associated Press reports that Russian authorities have arrested 3 terrorists and killed 1 other. The terrorists were all members of an ISIS cell. According to the report, 4 terrorists were part of a sleeper cell in the southern region of Dagestan in the city of Derbent, which is on the Caspian Sea, very close to the Azerbaijani border. The Russian anti-terrorism unit approached a home where one of the terrorists was hiding. A shootout ensued, and the terrorist was killed. The other 3 terrorists were arrested afterwards in other locations. ISIS is expanding their reach, and Russia is one of their primary targets. The Russian presence in the Middle East, particularly in Syria, does not please ISIS at all. Bahrain arrested 25 people suspected of terror. The police say that the 25 were part of a 54-person group. The police seized weapons, explosive cars, a boat, and a drone. The group is charged with going to Iran and Iraq and receiving training from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Iran has been trying to destabilize Bahrain since 2011 in the Arab Spring. Bahrain is controlled by Sunnis who compose about 15% of the country, but the majority of Bahrainis, about 85% of the country, are Shiites. There continues to be a low-level, constant movement by Shiites to overthrow Sunni leadership in Bahrain, and this group is another example of that endeavor. Hamas is increasing their attacks against Israel. Tensions along the Gaza-Israeli border are heating up and could continue to escalate. Numerous rockets have been launched from Gaza into Israel. Israeli military units are being targeted as they patrol the Israeli side of the border. Israel is striking back using drones and helicopters. Hamas has said that they will strike back at Israel because Israel has attacked Hamas nerve centers. This is not merely a repeating cycle of violence. This is an escalation in the number and intensity of the attacks by Hamas against Israel. The new administration in Washington is telling the United Nations to change its behavior, or they, the United States, will withdraw their support to membership. United States Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Aaron Barclay told the United Nations Human Rights Council to balance their agenda and stop their obsession with Israel. Barclay made this statement when she addressed the committee. She said, "The United States also remains deeply troubled by the Council's consistent, unfair, and unbalanced focus on one democratic country, Israel." The Trump White House is saying, plain and clear, that the United States will not be party to Israel bashing. Let's see how the Human Rights Council, one of the most anti-Israel forums in the world, responds. The King of Saudi Arabia, Salman bin Abdul Aziz, took a trip to Indonesia. Kings don't travel the same way you and I do. Salman bin Abdul Aziz travels with an entourage of between 900 and 1,500 people, including 100 security personnel. He travels with over 500 tons of luggage, including 2 Mercedes S600 limousines and 2 freestanding elevators. Yes, 2 freestanding elevators. 10 ministers, 25 princes joining the king on this month-long trip. In addition to Indonesia, the visit includes China, Japan, Maldives, and Jordan. In 2015, when the King of Saudi Arabia visited Washington, D.C., the royal entourage took over the entire Four Seasons Hotel in Georgetown, all 222 rooms. When the king travels, he comes complete with an entire crew and all the trappings of the monarchy. The King of Saudi Arabia will sacrifice none of the comforts of home, even when hitting the road. The Trump administration is backpedaling on its original position on Israel. The administration now seems to be adopting a more traditional U.S. point of view on settlements and on the West Bank. The Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman said that he has received direct messages from the United States that should Israel annex any part of the West Bank, it would trigger, quote, an immediate crisis, unquote, between the two nations. To quote Lieberman, "We received a direct message, not an indirect message, and not a hint from the United States. Imposing Israeli sovereignty on the West Bank would mean an immediate crisis with the new administration." Israel's defense minister also said that he received dozens of messages from leaders around the world about the traditional U.S. stance, which became an international issue after annexation again was raised by a junior member of the ruling Likud party, a man by the name of Micah Zohar. Lieberman and Netanyahu have tried to calm the bluster and diffuse the storm that has erupted, but world leaders are concerned about annexation, and that includes the Trump White House. Former Iranian President Mohammad Ahmadinejad was leading the country when it banned Twitter in 2009. He finally joined the social media platform. He was president from 2009 to 2013. In 2011, there was a groundswell against him called the Green Revolution. The members used Twitter to communicate and organize. Ahmadinejad's first tweet was, "In the name of God, peace upon all the freedom-loving people of the world. Hashtag I'm on Twitter." He then posted a video message in which he said, "In the name of God, the most merciful and most compassionate, follow me at Ahmadinejad 1956. That's me. Peace and love and best wishes." The year Ahmadinejad used in his username is his year of birth. His Twitter bio reads, husband, dad, grandfather, university professor, president, mayor, proud Iranian. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that in Hebrew and in the Bible and rabbinic literature, there are many words for justice? Sometimes they seem to be used interchangeably. They actually have their own meaning, and it is important to separate them. Words like mishpat, which means justice, and tzedek means righteousness. They're not synonyms. Justice is a concept imposed by a system of law, by the judiciary, and by society, hence the foundation of the word judge. Righteous is imposed by a system of values, hence the reason for the foundation of the word right. Other words include emet, which means truth, yashar, straight and upright, nachon, which means correct, and shurat hadin, adhering to the law. Judaism is a legal system, not simply a belief system. Traditionally, rabbis were not just communal leaders and prayer leaders or teachers. They were lawyers and judges. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.